Hello, I'm Jennifer Birch. I'm a student at the Department of Education at Aspen University. I'm taking a class called Leading Across Contexts and Cultures, and today I'll be talking about global management. There's a lot of things to be aware of for global management. First are the dimensions of cultural difference, those leader skill sets that it's important to have. And those are listed here on this slide. And we're going to talk about each one of them really, really quickly because we have a lot of information to cover in a short amount of time. These dimensions of cultural difference, these leader skill sets, are the particular things that leaders of multicultural organizations or local organizations that have a multicultural or diverse workforce need to be aware of as they focus on how to lead in different cultures than their own. First is power distance. That's simply how far or close you feel to the power. People with low power distance feel fairly close to power. They don't have any problem telling truth to leaders. They don't have any problem accepting or understanding equality. They don't expect their leaders to be all about who they know, but about what they know and what they do. High power distance, as the opposite, tends to look upon age, seniority, education as important. Protocols, titles, agreements with leaders, those are things that are important to people with a high power distance. That means they don't see themselves as close to power, but further removed. Someone else has the power. Uncertainty avoidance is exactly what it sounds like. It's the level of chaos or ambiguity or change that one can expect. Individualism and collectivism is how society or organizations work on sharing of resources. Individualism is it's kind of all about you, you take care of yourself. Collectivism is you look out for the group, that the organization protects the employees and vice versa. Gender differentiation is simply that. It's how well you accept those inequalities among genders. Are you a masculine society or culture? Are you a feminine society and culture? Are you a mix of both? This can be important during negotiations, and it's something that you have to be aware of as you're working your way through leadership in different cultures. Universalism and particularism is simply that, how you feel about the rules and norms of the business or of the organization. Universalistic is where you follow the rules come first. Particularistic is where you kind of look at the overall situation, that you want your relationships to be more important than the rules, and they might depend upon what's going on in the organization. Neutral versus effective is how you share or how you don't share your thoughts and your feelings, what your face shows. I'm a very effective person. I don't have any problem, or maybe I should say I have the inability to not share my feelings on my face. They always are there for people to see. Specific versus diffuse is simply how you approach other people. Do you want to be very specific, get to the point? You don't really care if you hurt other people's feelings. Diffuse cultures have a tendency to be more tactful. They want to preserve those relationships, and so they're polite. They may not always tell truth to power, but they are always going to avoid purposely hurting other people's feelings. Achievement versus ascription is simply that. Achievement is looking at skills over titles. Ascription is where the title defines who's in charge. The boss is the boss. Mr. Peabody, those kind of things. Attitude towards time control is something to be very aware of in different cultures, because different cultures definitely have different attitudes toward time control. Fixed time, people or cultures want structure, they want punctuality, they think being late is rude. Fluid time have more focus on the relationships. They're willing to put the time in before and after to develop those relationships and not be so focused on the exact time frame of something. Internal versus external control is simply that. I'm going to let you read this slide real quickly. It's how you feel about interacting with nature, where you feel your control over your environment comes from. Assertiveness is that how confrontational are you? If you're very high assertiveness, you have a tendency to be very confrontational. You're tough, you value competition. If you're low assertiveness, you want your relations to be harmonic, you want them to be friendly and warm, and you don't want to have conflict. Future orientation is simply that, how you engage in behaviors such as planning, investing in the future. They're short-term and long-term, and society affects that, culture affects that, and you need to be aware of how the cultures that you're working with interact with the future. Performance is the same thing. It's how a group recognizes and rewards performance. High performance orientation, they recognize performance. Low looks at family background or the position that you hold as performance. Humane orientation is the same thing. Sympathy and concern for others is a very high humane orientation. Power, possessions, and personal enhancement is a low orientation. There's also several dilemmas listed here on this slide that leaders must be aware of, and things that they need to be aware of when they're working across multicultures, where they're working with diverse people. We're going to address each of these very, very quickly. First is self-awareness, identity. Who am I? You need to be authentic, and you need to ethically conduct yourself as a leader, no matter the culture that you're in. But you might also need to be aware of those social identities and how they influence behavior in different cultures. Image management, when and how to align your image with what your members expect, your attire, your tone, your pitch. Understanding business etiquette is all part of this. Negotiations, mutual agreements, cooperation, and competition. Women do have a tendency to negotiate for less and to negotiate less. So they want to make sure that you understand that process. And there's several different types of a negotiation: avoidance, compromise, compete to win. The best kind of negotiation, in my opinion, is win-win. Communication styles. Do you want to communicate tasks, understand conflict, or communicate your self-image? Be aware of your nonverbal and physical communication. Make sure that you understand that image that you're putting out there. Decision making, again, there's several different types of decision making listed here: consultative, centralized, homogeneous. You want to find the optimal fit between the style and the organizational culture. You don't want to go in and do centralized authoritarian decision making in a society where it's not accepted, where everybody should have a voice. So you need to understand that. Problem solving and managing conflict. There's several different ways of doing that listed here. This could take an entire presentation just on managing conflict. Work culture, again, moving from enlightenment, where you realize your own potential, to rugged individualism, where you have competition with others. It just depends on the place that you work. Team building and leading global teams is important. You need to have self-awareness, you need to have cultural confidence, and you need to learn about what makes a good leader. So here's some ways to develop high-functioning teams. There's 3 specific models listed in our text. There's also some other ways, so I'm going to talk real quickly about those. First is to use the KSA model, developing culturally competent leaders. It's the knowledge of your racial and cultural heritage and your lived experience of yourself and those you're leading. The skills to use cross-cultural communication, to improve understanding, and the awareness or having a sensitivity toward differences, recognize your own limits, and recognize the limits of those that you work with. The other model is the ASK model, using the same words but with slightly different meanings and developing culturally fluent leaders. First is to explore awareness, your own background, as well as the culture of others, to communicate and lead across multicultural teams, and then cultural knowledge is to seek and obtain an education about the diverse groups that you're working with. Finally, there's this leader self-awareness self-assessment that has several things that you need to think about and things that you need to be aware of: your own strengths and weaknesses, your own cultural history, your race and gender identity, cultural identity, to identify and counter any victim culture that you may be involved with or that you may fall into. Be aware of opportunities and pitfalls, have a workable career trajectory, and learn from your own lived experiences. My lived experiences have influenced me, and they will continue to influence me, and that's probably the biggest influence on how I lead. Finally, you need to know that these three things, the leader skill sets, the global leader dilemmas, and the high functioning teams development, all three go together in multicultural leadership. You cannot simply have one without the other. And the key, you've probably seen this word over and over and over again, is having the communication skills to communicate across cultures. That is so important. But you can't have those communication skills if you don't have the knowledge, if you don't have the awareness. People can tend to go through life and they're never really aware of people that are different from themselves. And it's just not that way anymore. You have to be aware of the different cultures that you're dealing with. Finally, I do want to show you the references. This is the textbook that we've worked with. That's the first reference. The other is the study from the Globe project that's listed here. Please feel free to look up this information and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you very much.